I'm starting the presentation. For those who don't know me, I am the Eastern Region Coach, and I'm also an RNI safety volunteer. And I'm joined by two of my RNLI colleagues, Neil Withers, who is the Area Lifesaving Manager in the Southeast, and Nick Fecher, who is the RNLI Water Safety Delivery Support in the Southeast, both of whom are also BSAC members. So we're all in good company. So for anybody who follows the Eastern Region Facebook page or has me on Facebook, you will know that I asked for some photos. And this is what I was using the photos for. So imagine being lost at sea. That would be like trying to find your picture in this big picture of pictures. It's not very easy unless you know exactly where to look. And that's what we're going to come to in more details. So who are we? I am obviously the person on the left-hand side. Neil is the person in the middle. He'll be speaking shortly. And Nick is the person on the right-hand side. And again, he'll be speaking shortly as well. So this is your team of presenters for this evening. So let's go back to basics for a minute. So we're going to cover back to basics. We're going to cover PLBs, your personal locator beacons, AIS, the automated identification systems, EPIRBs, which are electronic position indicating radio beacons, and what to do if your boat's lost at sea if you do one, and then touch on the sea survival course. So back to basics. We're all taught during our training to use a surface marker buoy, a traditional surface marker buoy. The best way to be seen is to ensure that this is as tall as possible. And if you are lost at sea, don't use it as a float, don't use it to keep you up. You need to have it standing upright. One easy way to do this is actually to add a 1 or 2 pound weight just to keep it way down and pointing up. The other way, especially in low light conditions or should you be out at night, is actually to shine your torch up the SMB. Then the whole SMB will actually light up. Other things to consider in the traditional manner is carrying a whistle or an air horn. Whilst the sound will only carry a short distance, it can actually help pinpoint you as help does get closer. Mirrors do work well. We often see a lot of people talking about mirrors, but they do rely on bright sunlight, which, as you can imagine, if you're diving in and around the UK waters, isn't always there, especially outside the summer. Strobes work well in low light, but again, they won't work well in bright light either. But there are other things to consider, and we're going to cover those in this presentation. So we're going to look at all the additions that are covered in this picture here that I've mentioned earlier and go through them in detail and when what will help you and what's best in what circumstances. But before we start, I just want to show you a video.
We all went down to Falmouth for a week's diving, which should have just been a complete pleasurable experience. But I think it was day 2 that this all happened. The buddy I was diving with, we both got back to where the shot should have been, but it had broken away. So we had to deploy our delayed surface marker buoys. On the way up, we got separated, carried out me normal decompression. Didn't seem a problem because every now and again the boat would come over to me. I could hear its engine. Everything's going as normal. When I surfaced and looked around and couldn't see the boat, you kind of think, well, I'll have another look. And then I managed to see the boat way in the distance, and I could make out people standing on the top of the wheelhouse. And I realised that there was a situation developing. Having realised that HMS Somerset had spotted me because it just stopped dead directly opposite me, it was just relief, but you just still keep on waving.
When Paul said to me that he was lost at sea, that he was on the surface on his own for 2 hours, that he had the RNLI looking for him, the lifeboats looking for him, he was picked up by a big Navy ship, it was a big shock.
From surfacing to being found was 2.5 hours, but I was more than confident that having got the personal location beacon, I would eventually be found. It's just a small diver in a big sea is hard to spot. On the day of the incident, there was 7 other people on that dive. Some would say it was fortunate that it was me who they lost, because on that day I was the only person with a personal location beacon. Since then, the other 7 now own personal location beacons because they've seen the advantage to both themselves and the rescue services.
Paul is very, very cautious. He's very safety conscious. He's very thorough, checking his equipment, going through safety procedures. Although it takes up a huge amount of his time, I was really relieved that he's like that.
It's all about visibility. The more visibility the divers have, the greater chance we have of finding them. I can't believe that some divers enter the water without visual aids such as surface marker buoys, PLBs, and they're readily available on the market now at a very reasonable price. And what price do you put on your life? This is the thing, with those aids, it aids us.
Because of the PLB, the RNLI stayed in the area. They kept looking for him, working, I think he said, in a grid motion. They knew that he was there, and that made the recovery that much quicker.
Probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, really. Anyone that gets off the back of a boat, it's a must. When I purchased my personal location beacon, I never thought I would ever have to use it. But I can't emphasise enough that, you might buy this and you might never have to use it. But even if you just use it that one occasion, it will make your life and everyone else's life so much easier.
So I'm now going to hand you over to Nick, who's going to talk to you about personal locator beacons. So over to you, Nick.
Great, thank you, Lisa. Sorry, guys, about that sort of just refilm, but hopefully you got the message. Paul, as you can tell, one lucky guy. If you ever get the opportunity of meeting Paul, he's a very active diver. He's very happy to tell you the slightly fuller story of that particular dive and how it came to the point where he was separated, not only from his buddy, but also from his boat. And I personally have done a lot of diving in the UK, and I can relate to that story and think of how many times that it may have actually, I may have come close to that particular point where you feel as if the boat, can't see you. And I'm sure that many of you guys on the seminar tonight probably have also got stories similar to that. So my little section is just talking a bit about PLBs. So PLBs, what are they? Well, the first thing that we need to sort of talk about is the fact that PLBs are GMDSS approved. Now, GMDSS is the Global Maritime Distress and Safety System. It's an internationally agreed upon set of safety procedures regarding types of equipment, communication protocols. They're used to increase safety, to make it easier to rescue distress ships, boats, craft, and individuals. And PLBs are a recognised form of a GMDSS device. The importance of that is that it will be monitored. So if you use a GMDSS device, you will have someone listening to you at the other end. Someone will pick up your form of communication. Unlike a VHF radio, where you're not necessarily guaranteed that someone will hear you, with a PLB, you're almost 100%, never 100%, nearly 100% certain that someone will get that signal at the end. Blowing a whistle is not a GMDSS device. There's no guarantee at all anyone will hear you. So one other thing about PLBs, they have complete worldwide coverage. They have coverage no matter which bit of the planet you're on. You could be up a mountain, you could be on the ice caps, and it will still work. Someone will hear you. They are a recognised emergency signal worldwide. They also need to be manually activated. This is a big difference between a PLB, personal locator beacon, and we're going to come on and mention later, I believe, EPIRBs. A lot of people think that a personal locator beacon is one and the same. They're not. A PLB is as it's almost sort of given away in its title. It's a personal locator beacon. EPIRBs are more for a vessel. So a personal locator beacon is for you. It should be on your person. And as a result, it needs to be manually activated. It's not automatic. Prior to use, it needs to be registered with a national authority. In the UK, this is the Coast Guard. Really important, this. If you go onto Google, you just put in UK beacon authority, and you'll come up with a simple fill-in form, which you fill in online. It's completely free, and it will register the beacon to you. Really important if you actually, when you come to activate it, that they've got all of your details. Okay, next slide, please. So how does it work? Well, we've already mentioned that it's manual, and all of the PLBs work exactly the same way. They're very, very simple. So one thing I have to say, it has to be activated on the surface. It needs a clear line of sight to a satellite. And these work from satellites. These work from a satellite system that is covering the whole of the globe. Like all satellites, sometimes when you press the button and activate it, it will start transmitting. But it might take a few minutes before a satellite passes overhead for your particular signal to be picked up. And for those people who want to know what the satellite system is, it is a cost-price CAPSAC satellite system, which is pretty well. It covers the whole of the globe, as I say. So it's COSPAS SAR SAT, so COSPAS SARSAT. Probably said that wrong, but it's the way I always tend to say it. Once you get to the surface, you open up a cover. They all work the same way. There's only about 3 or so devices that are available for purchase in the UK. You open up the cover, and there's normally a button, just one single button. You press it. However, you must also as well make sure that the aerial is extended in clear view of the sky. So when you get to the surface, pull out the aerial, make sure it's extended, clear view to the sky, and then just press the button, and that's it. And there normally will be a light that will indicate that it's transmitting. So it transmits this signal up to a satellite. As I say, you may have to wait a few minutes for a satellite to pass overhead. The satellite picks up this distress signal, which is out on a 406 megahertz. It then sends this satellite, and it's picked up by a local ground receiving station. This receives the signal. This then generates the distress alerts, and it sends the distress alert to a mission control center. Now, this is where it's important to make sure that your PLB is registered. In the UK, it would actually be registered through the Coast Guard, and it will then, if you've done that, the signal will then, this Receive-Based Ground Receiving Station will send this alert to NMOC in Fecher, which is the big National Maritime Operations Centre in Fecher, the big hub for the UK Coast Guard. They will have your details in. This signal will go to them, and they receive this distress alert, and they then will decide what the next action is. So say you've set this beacon off off the Lizard, for instance, down in Cornwall. They will note the position, because these PLBs, it's important to make sure they are GPS enabled. They have GPS in them. All the ones on sale now do, but just make sure that is definitely the case, because it will, when you press that button, it will send out your position as well. So they'll know where you set this one off. So they see it's off the Lizard. They then will make a decision as to what search and rescue asset to send out. It may be a lifeboat. It may be a helicopter. Who knows? They then will then take control and take charge of that search and rescue operation. And a resource will come out and start looking for you. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so make sure, as I mentioned, your GPS is enabled. That there's a GPS enabled device. These devices are, I'm going to say, splash proof. They're waterproof in italics to a depth of between 5 and the newest one on the market is 15 meters. But they still suggest you should put them in a waterproof pot. There are a couple of waterproof pots available on the market. The one that you're seeing on your screen now is available from Custom Divers. I believe they're priced around that sort of £70 mark. And they are waterproof to 170 meters. They are double O-ringed, and it is important that you have the right O-rings in the right place on these, and that you don't over tighten them. Because if you do over tighten them, just like on a torch sometimes with the O-rings, is that they will distort slightly and you can get leakage. And equally as well, you'll never be able to get the pot undone if you over tighten them as well. So, and the 3 devices that are on the market fit this Custom Divers pot. There is also another pot available, which is produced by McMurdo. It's slightly bigger and it's more expensive. So the pot that most divers tend to buy is this one by Custom Divers. So make sure you put it into the waterproof pot. Otherwise, unfortunately, it won't survive your dive. As I mentioned before, when you get to the surface and activate it, it needs to have this clear line of sight and therefore with the aerial extended. And once activated, the signal will continue to send for 24 hours. The reason why there's a time limit on it is because that is how long the battery is guaranteed to send out that signal for, to give the power to the unit. Part of the sort of regulations for the manufacturer of these PLBs are that they have to activate for 24 hours. That's another difference compared to the EPIRBs, which are 48 hours. And that's the reason why the EPIRBs are a much bigger unit, mainly because they need a bigger battery. And also, as I mentioned before, they can also be used on land in areas where, you know, there's no mobile phone signal. So right up top of a mountain, up on an ice cap, doesn't matter where you are on the planet, satellite coverage is going to be there. Okay, next one. So these are the three that are available. ACR, then there's the Ocean Signal PLB1, and then there's the McMurdo Fast Find. The ACR actually is the one that we in the RNLI have got on our crew, well, with our crew, on within our crew jackets, and that's the one that we use. To be honest, the ACR was, I think, probably purchased by the RNLI because it was before the Ocean Signal one came out. The Ocean Signal one is slightly smaller. It's got a slightly better waterproof rating on it. It's the 15-meter one, but it operates exactly the same way. Both are really good units. There's no real difference in operation between them. And then the McMurdo is the original one. And they all cost exactly the same. And the McMurdo uses a spring-loaded aerial on the top with a big button on as well. And they all cost roughly around the same sort of money. I think you find on the open market, they range somewhere between £170 to maybe £250, something like that, depending upon where you go looking. The other thing I just want to talk about, just briefly to finish off regarding PLBs, is that the PLBs operate on this 406 hertz frequency, which is picked up by the satellites. It's the rescue frequency. They also as well pump out another signal at a lower frequency, 121.5 megahertz. And this is a homing signal frequency. Number of the search and rescue units will be able to pick up this particular signal when they get close to your proximity, and they will be able to home in on your signal and find you really quite quickly. So, as said by Paul Gibson in his film, something that he purchased, never expected a million years probably to use, but he was glad he did. And it's one of those things is that for that sort of money, something you're definitely going to consider. And the way we normally talk to divers about is just say, guys, do a sort of risk assessment. If it's the type of diving you think where you might find you have that chance, real chance of being separated from your boat, maybe you're going to do a long hang, you're going to be moving quite swiftly in the current, I would seriously consider about investing in one of these, because a PLB, absolute must to be used at all times. Sorry, not PLB, an SMB to be used all times, but with an SMB, there is no guarantee that necessarily it will be spotted. And this is what Paul had. Paul has got a pretty large SMB. That was up. He was doing a very long decompression hang, granted, but it wasn't seen by the boat. And when he surfaced, he could see his dive boat who was pulling in his buddy, but they just couldn't see him in big swells. So PLB, and the one that Paul used is actually the McMurdo one, the one on the right. That's the one that he had. And he is convinced that that saved his life. Right, next slide, and I'll leave you in the capable hands of Neil.
Good evening, everybody. Name's Neil Withers, diver and ex-firefighter, now looking after the lifeboats in London and across the Thames from Teddington down to Southend and Sheerness. Also a diver, I've been diving since I was 12 years old. Very embedded in water safety, and diver safety has been a key part. You may have seen Nick and I and Lisa at the dive shows singing our message. Probably bored you stupid talking about making sure you're seen, and it makes it easy for us to find you. I talk basically as a 12, 13-year-old, being we were diving was it 70, 75, 76 out of Fort Bovisand, and I spent 3 hours lost off the Mewstone in fog. We basically tied ourselves together, and all we had was a mirror and a whistle, and you could hear boats going past. You could hear foghorns going, but to actually try and track down somebody's attention, to try and get that. So it really woke me up to that being lost at sea very early in my diving career, if you like. And then later as a lifeboat crew, when you're trying to find somebody who's 3 or 4 inches high in a swollen sea in fallen darkness is not easy. So you've got to have a means of making yourself visible to be able to see. Flares are great. All the stuff that you talked about, torches and surface marker buoys are great. At night, in fog, those become very restricted in how useful they are. Now, now we're in 2021 with the electronics that's available. The PLB has got to be a must. It's the thing that's going to pinpoint you anywhere on the planet. So I'll talk to you a little bit about AIS, but PLBs are the Rolls Royce, if you like, of what you need to be found if you get into trouble. They'll get you the emergency service there, and they'll be able to pinpoint you within 10 meters and find you very, very quickly. So rather than a 15-hour search with a Mark 1 eyeball, looking for a group of divers, looking for an individual diver, electronically we'll be able to pinpoint you very, very quickly, rescue and save lives. So what is the difference between a PLB and an AIS? Basically, as Nick has said, a PLB says, this is where I am here, I need help, come and get me. AIS simply says, I am here. It shows where you are or where a person is in the water when they've become either detached from their boat or come up from a dive and they're lost. So really, perhaps we should have done this presentation the other way around, in that the AIS came first, was the first generation, if you like, of an electronic device. It was developed for man overboard, so a crew on a boat, they would all wear one. If they fell overboard, they could the AIS would trigger, and then with the use of a chart plotter or other electronics on the boat, they could spot where this person was that had gone overboard and recover them. So that's basically where it started. AIS is not GMDSS approved or recognised because it's not a beacon, it's not a distress beacon, it's not asking for help. So this is key part when you're making a decision and you're looking at what's available on the market, and there's a lot out there. There's different variations of AIS. Some come, the older ones with a VHF radio. So you've got to do your homework and understand exactly what you're looking for and what you want it to do. It doesn't work on 406 as a SAR or an EPIRB will, which again is other equipment that comes under the GM DDS regulations. Some of them do come with DSC. Now, DSC is digital selective cooling. Basically, what that does, it's you register that part of the device, and it sends a text message, if you like. It gives it a number, it gives a location, and sometimes if it's a really if it's on a vessel, if you've got DSC on a vessel, you can plug in exactly what's happening. Are you sinking? Are you aground? But basically, it's a text message DSC, digital selective cooling. But it does need a MSSI number, which is a Marine Mobile Service Identity number. That way, that call can then be registered either through the Coast Guard or linked into your chart plotter, or the electronics on the boat or on the mothership, on the dive boat, so that they know that you're in trouble and they can then look for you. But again, as I say, not all AISs are that intelligent. Some are really, really basic. So do your homework. The equipment, AIS equipment is dependent on what is ever on vessels around you. So if it's on the dive boat, if it's on your own boat, if it's on your own rib, you need to make sure that the AIS is capable of speaking to that equipment. It should talk to other chart plotters. It should be able to interact with other vessels in the facility, but there is no guarantee dependent on how it's been set up and where it's been set up. And also some of the older equipment, whether or not it's had software updates and it's able to pinpoint the fact that you're actually in distress and you haven't gone overboard. As Nick said, one of the other differences between AIS and PLB is an AIS is automatically triggered or can be automatically triggered. Two ways of doing it. One is water, same as a life jacket. So as soon as it's immersed in water, it will trigger it and it'll send off a signal. The other way is more mechanical, where there's a short lanyard onto the trigger button, and as the life jacket inflates or there's some sort of mechanical stretch on that cord, it will activate. But as I say, again, this is more set up for people using vessels in and around vessels, sailing, that type of thing, rather than ideally for the diving market. Nick happily covered some of the stuff that I was going to cover, so I'm just flicking through my notes here. So just to go through that, so the slide that's up in front of us, it's not GMDSS approved. It's not a distress beacon. Communicates by sending a signal to AIS units. So the automated identification system, you can get them on apps now. You can get them on your iPhone. Marine Traffic is a good free one. If you download that, that will show up AIS of where vessels are. But again, with the personal AIS, you're not going to, the signal that actually gives out can change. It can be just a red dot, it can be a cross, it can be a circle. It can also give an audible alarm to a boat that you're in trouble, but there's no guarantees of that. It depends what equipment they've got and whether it's been updated. The range is dependent again on antenna height, so between 2.5 to 5 nautical miles. But again, it depends on weather, it depends on sea state and the height of the actual antenna out of the water. As I said, it's been automatically activated, which is either water activated or physically, mechanically activated by a life jacket or by something actually moving to force a short lanyard to trigger it. Range is affected by obstacles. So again, unlike a PLB that sends a signal to a satellite that's picked up, it's going to have a clear view to the sky. If there is something in between you, a headland or a pier, or some that will affect the signal and whether or not you can be located quickly and easily. Lisa, could I have the next slide, please? So the automatic identification system, is it personal or vessel? It's personal. We already said it's no to being approved as a distress beacon. 1-to-1 it can be, or it can be 1-to-many. So as long as that signal is clear and it's on there, and the equipment that is on the boat and your AIS has been interfaced with that, it's been linked, it's been downloaded, or the equipment carried on the other boats is up to date and it's intelligent, it will pick you up. But there are no guarantees. And as you see, there's a couple of things that points there to consider when you're actually, whether you're looking at an AIS or a PLB. But honestly, coming from this perspective, I think the fellow presenters will say, always go for a PLB. The downside of the PLB is it's not always going to be automatic. If you're on an AIS and you are a skipper and you are driving a boat, an AIS will, and it's a personal AIS, will always have a personal number of 972. So if you see if you're looking at an AIS screen or a chart plotter and you see a personal number come up that starts 972, you'll know that's a PR. It is an AIS and it's not a vessel, it's a person. One thing with an AIS, and if you're diving off your own boat or you're off the club boat, then you need to make sure that it's interfaced, it's linked and it's down and you know what's what. If you're on a boat that you don't normally dive off of, or you're visiting somewhere, then test the AIS and make sure that the chart plotter on that vessel can pick it up and the skipper knows that that's what you're carrying. And then they'll be able to read the electronics a lot better if you do trigger it and you get into trouble. Early versions, as I said, had a VHF license and allowed you to speak to a rescuer. Due to licensing and manufacturers, it's only the older ones we don't. You know, I don't think I'm right in saying, Nick, you can't buy these now.
Just for clarification, Neil, the very early versions of this particular one, the Nautilus Lifeline, which is a Canadian manufactured device, was just purely a VHF and DSC radio, and it was grey and quite large in size. They stopped the manufacture of that probably about 4 years ago, something like that. The version you see now on your screens is actually AIS DSC. And it's been made for divers. It is still available to be bought. It is still manufactured. There was some rumours that they had stopped manufacturing it, but I've actually got that clarified by the distributor, which is CNC in the UK. They have still got stock and they're still able to supply it, and it still can be bought. And interesting enough, it actually is about the same sort of price as the PLBs. But the one advantage of this is that it is made for divers and it doesn't need to go into waterproof pot. As long as that lid is closed, it's completely waterproof.
Lovely. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, that is, as I say, one of the disadvantages at the moment, and I'm sure within the next year, 18 months, we're going to see PLBs that are depth proof, that they won't need to put into a capsule, but at the moment, the IIS, some of those, as you can see, will be down rated to 130 metres. But the next slide, please, Lisa. So we talked about digital selective device, or DSC is the actual signal that's given off. So range is similar to AIS, is up to 5 nautical miles. They are GMDSS approved. So as Nick said earlier, under those standards, it talks about communication protocols and procedures. So the DSC part of it is then qualifies it for GMDSS approval. It sends a distress alert followed by a mayday on channel 16. Sorry, you need to send a distress alert followed by a mayday on channel 16 once it's received. Again, it delivers a signal to local vessels and stations that are in range, but all the things I said before, as long as the equipment, the receiving equipment, is capable of doing so, if it's been updated, always check that the boat you're going from, and if you've got an AIS, that it will talk. Requires an operator's license. Again, this is the license in the MSSI number, Maritime Service Identity number. Again, just so that it can be registered against you and they know who you are. Next one, please, Lisa. Over to you, Lisa, then, I think.
Over to EPIRBs. So actually, these have pretty much been covered by Nick and Neil between them, which is quite handy. As you can see from the picture at the bottom, these work in a way that they send the signal up to the satellite, which then in the same way to the PLBs then goes to a ground receiving centre station. And then as Nick gave kind of this process flow in a lot of detail, so I'm not going to go through it again. That will then go to a mission control, who will then decide what you need and where you need it. So obviously if you're at sea, that will go out to Coast Guard and to RNLI. If you are on land, that will go to the appropriate mountaineering, for example, rescue bodies. So we've covered the EPIRBs, the AIS, and the PLBs. So now we are going to move on to what if you're on a boat and the boat's lost at sea. So firstly, I'm assuming pretty much everybody in this call, if not everybody, has actually got a mobile phone. So ideally you'll have that on the boat with you, and you'll keep it in a waterproof pouch or in a dry bag, regardless of whether you're on a hard boat or a rib or anything bigger. If you are in range of land, obviously you're going to call 999 or 112 and ask for the Coast Guard. They will need your location. So if everybody who's on the call wants to get out their phones quickly, a quick competition for you, I want you to tell me via what 3 words, and the link is on here, where trickles.label.grad is at. The Coast Guard, as an example, has now started using what 3 words because it can literally pinpoint you to 3 square meters in the entire world. So if you can pop your answers in chat, let's see who gets there first. And you don't actually need to put the what 3 words into what 3 words. You can actually just type it. Yep, there we go. Swanage Pier, very good. So I think, oh, it's all moving too quickly now. It's very good, those who got there. It is actually the end of Swanage Pier. So I intentionally chopped off all the giveaway items that were kind of below, so you couldn't see where they were. So perfect. Thank you very much for that. So what 3 words is something to really consider when you are giving location? Again, be it on land or actually out at sea. So I'm going to hand over to Nick to take you through safe tracks now.
All right, hi guys. Safe tracks. Hopefully some of you actually have heard of safe tracks and may possibly even have got it loaded up on your phone. This is a app that has been in existence for a few years now, and there are a few apps out there that do similar job in that they enable you to send passage plans, have friends, family, to be able to track you, and an app where you can sort of send messages from the app, which will include maybe your position, etc., etc. But Safe Tracks is slightly different from every other app out there, and it's why we're talking about it, because it is endorsed by the Coast Guard. It officially replaces the CG66 program, and that ceased to be a couple of years ago now. For those of you who don't know what CG66 was, it was a voluntary program set up by the Coast Guard for everyone who had a boat, no matter what boat it was, to register the boat with the Coast Guard. So if you contacted the Coast Guard, they could quickly get up all of your details, so they know exactly what boat it is, what colour it is, what size it was, etc., etc., home port, etc., etc. They probably have your MMSI number details on there as well, in order to help assist if it was required to come out to your assistance. So it was a scheme which I think was taken up in some marine quarters quite well, but in others it wasn't. And it was quite labour intensive. So they scrapped it and it has been replaced by Safe Tracks, but Safe Tracks does a whole heap more. What Safe Tracks does, it allows you, if you're in a vessel, to register obviously your vessel, but also as well allows you to set up passage plans, etc., etc., or it'll allow you just for other people to track you where you're going. So you can send out a code to friends and family. They can click on it and they can actually live watch where your boat is, so they can track you exactly where you're going. And for some people that is a bit scary. For other people that gives good presence of mind. A few other apps do that, but then the big one with Safe Tracks is that it has also a big red button in it, which is an emergency button. If you press that emergency button, it immediately sends a signal to NMOC in Fecher, the big National Maritime Operations Centre for the Coast Guard, and they have 2 screens there which are permanently monitored 24/7, and it will come up on the screen that you are in distress. It will have all your details, it will pop up and it will give you your exact position, and then the device, it will come out from your phone, it's just an app on a phone, will then pump out a signal every 5 seconds so they can track where you're drifting. So it has, as of last November, had a big update in that it was slightly, the best way to phrase it, slightly deboatified in the respect you didn't have to, every time you registered on it and registered your details on it, log your boat details, because you may not have a boat. So it allows anybody that uses our coastal waters to use it with ease. One, to get friends and family to track them if they wish to. It has all the social media functions that you'd expect from it, but it allows it to become a means of a rescue device. We know that mobile phone technology's got restrictions, coverage, etc., but the coverage around our coast is getting better and better. With the explosion of wind farms around our coast, part of the agreement when they build wind farms is they need to have mobile phone aerials on them. So our coverage of mobile phone signal is getting better and better and better. The advantage also as well with Safe Tracks, and like with any sort of emergency signal from a phone, is that it doesn't always have to use your particular phone provider. If you use it, it will pick up any phone signal that's available, and it will use that phone signal. So if you're with Vodafone and you haven't got a Vodafone signal, it picks up on an EE aerial, then EE will allow you their aerial to be used in these cases. So I would strongly advise, if you haven't already, just to download it. The website is Safe Tracks. It's actually on the RYA website, because RYA are the license holder in the UK. And download it. It's completely free. There's no charge to use it at all. And it is a very useful app. So as I say, you have to put your contact details in, vessel details if only appropriate, emergency contacts, and then you've got this big emergency function, track position. It is easy to use, and I encourage you to look at it. If you do any other activity on the water, not just diving, but if you're a paddler, if you're go out on a stand-up paddleboard, you should take a means of call of help with you, and that could be your phone in a waterproof pouch, and you can use Safe Tracks for that as purpose as well. Okay, next slide, please, Lisa.
Okay, so the next slide's actually, I've just remembered I did forget to mention that for those of you who have an iPhone, I'm not sure if you're aware, but you hit the on-off button repeatedly, you'll actually get a 5-second warning. A distress signal will actually go out to 999 with your latitude and longitude as well.
I'll just add to that, Lisa, as well. It is something which you can do now. I warn you, you get this 5-second really loud beeping going on, which allows you to cancel it, that alert. But it is only available on the iPhones. Don't believe all the Android devices have that capability, but all the iPhones do, even the older versions do.
Lisa,
you're able to cancel it.
Just to give you a heads up, on the Android, if you hit the power button 5 times, it will send a distress signal to a nominated contact with position and photo.
Yeah, you have to set that up, I believe, don't you, beforehand?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah. And it can be a number of contacts.
It's just there. It's I think you do actually, be honest, have to, I can't remember whether I did or not, I have to slide just a slider over in the settings just so it can happen. But when we talk about this, we try and make sure we talk about this to a group of adults, not a bunch of kids, because that would be chaos. You suddenly find there's a load of police cars flying out all around the country because they've set off the alert. But it is a useful trick to know regarding your mobile phones. And again, that signal will go down any mobile phone signal. It doesn't have to be your particular provider.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Mick. Okay, so the last one I want to mention is the RNLI Sea Survival course. Now, I hope everybody is aware of this as BSAC members, even I think there's some non-BSAC members on here as well. This can be delivered by any instructor, and pretty much most of the major agencies that we have in the UK have this course tweaked to their own specs. So as I was saying right back at the beginning, you would have seen this picture, and there's no way you could have found yourself very easily within this picture. Hopefully we've now given you the tools and the things to think about to help the Coast Guard and the RNLI come in, or wherever you are in the world, actually the local rescue facilities, to come in and actually find you. So once you've got a better idea of where you are, you can actually find people. So for example, we've got Nick here, we've got Neil here, this is myself, my friend Renee here. So you can start actually putting faces in. Gary's over here, Gary Dallas. So you can actually start finding people once you've got those skills.